Yo, what's good, guys? We're back at it again with another MLB The Show 25 video for you guys, and today we're going to be going over what I think are some of the better pitchers in the game. If you guys don't know, pitching is incredibly subjective. A lot of it is just the type of opponent that you're playing, what difficulty you're on. There's a lot that goes how well you do with certain pitch mixes. There's a ton that goes into how good a pitcher is going to be for somebody. Like Blake Snell might be great for you and really bad for me just because you're playing worse players or you just utilize that pitch mix better. There's a lot of stuff that goes into why a pitcher is bad or good. But I'm going to do my best to just kind of give you on aggregate what pitchers are going to be the best. So if you enjoy the content, I would urge you to like and subscribe. We're going to be doing it all year. And our first card here, Outlier. I think he's probably A tier. After you get to like Hall of Fame, Legend, Go Even, I think he's going to be really good for your average All-Star player, which it is hard to be an All-Star player right now because Hall of Fame starts at 600 when it's not necessarily supposed to. But for your average All-Star player, not somebody I would have in their wheelhouse. Also, somebody said that this is really zoomed out and they can't read the players' names and there's no name. It's just how the website is. So, it'll be an audio only experience for the most part. Zach Wheeler. I think I want to put him in S tier for now. I don't think he's anything crazy, but I just think he's going to consistently give you good starts. Has a very good pitch mix now since they stopped giving him like the double curveball treatment. So I think he's solid. I don't think he's disgusting. I don't think he has anything overpowering, but I think he's pretty solid. Yamamoto, I think the speed differential kind of holds him back from being S tier. I could see a world where he is really good, but for most people, I think he's just going to be fine, which is basically every pitcher in the game right now is just going to be fine. Yimi Garcia, 5-pitch reliever. If he's playing up, maybe you make the argument he's S tier. I think he's just fine, like just kind of mid at this point. New Walker Buehler, I think he's all right. Traditionally, Walker Buehlers are pretty bad in the game. I think the only one I've ever really enjoyed was the World Series one last year, and that's mostly because he was a good long reliever. So back in the starter role, don't know how much I'll love him. I think he's fine. Ubaldo Jimenez, I think Wheeler's probably just a better version. I think Wheeler probably throws a little harder on average, and he'll have an inside edge. So I think I like Wheeler over him, but Ubaldo's a similar card. Glasnow, C tier, just doesn't really have the stuff. Throws a 4-seam and a 2-seam, which is basically the same pitch. Throws a curveball, which is pretty useless in MLB The Show, and then has a hard slider. So the hard slider gets him up there. If he had like a sinker, he'd be a little more usable. If they gave him a sinker and a cutter, he'd actually be pretty good. But as of right now, just not really that guy. Hoffman, A tier. He's just kind of what he always is, which is like a non-volatile reliever out the pen. He's never going to just shut your opponent down, and they kind of know what he wants to throw, but it's still hard to hit. So most people aren't going to have a ton of success against Hoffman. Is it worth collecting the Padres for? Probably not, but he is there. Glavine, A tier, I guess. I'm not the biggest Glavine fan. I think the only Glavine I've ever really loved was when he was the NL Collection Award for the Mets a while ago. But I think he's still good. He's still fine, especially in this meta where a bunch of people are stacking their lineups with lefties. I think he can give you some good starts. I don't think he's going to be anything crazy. Screwball, S tier with an asterisk. When you get a runner on base, he gets really hard to use. His pinpoint speeds up a ton. It's still doable, but it requires a lot of concentration. If you can get him on a day where he's playing up, I think he's up there. But I don't think he's dominant. He doesn't have outlier. He has a pretty good pitch mix, not an insane pitch mix. And he throws a hard slider, as in like 89, 90, but it's not like 92 or anything game breaking to where it can just carry him. Tanner Scott, A tier. I think just through 9 wise and just being a semi-hard lefty to hit lefty-lefty. Is good enough. If he had the sinker, I could see an argument for S tier, but I think there's just some guys I prefer over him still. Tanner with an asterisk, I think on All-Star, not going to be anything crazy. Hall of Fame probably also won't be. When you get those higher difficulties where hits don't matter quite as much and you can more so just put stuff in a corner with him because he has really high control and doesn't throw that hard, I think he gets a lot more usable then. Steve Carlton, Honestly, have no idea, and this might be the first card that we actually have to look up. So I've glanced at his mix, but I haven't personally used him because he is probably overpriced for what he is right now. So you can see 75 hits, 75 walks, 84 control. If you guys are wondering what matters in pitchers, that's pretty much it. If you're using the show's on website, this velo difference is pretty big. You can see he throws a mid slider. They have it ranked as their number 4, but it's just not thrown hard. So it's almost more like a changeup in a way. Four seam that he's going to top out at like 97 with, a curveball, a sinker, and a changeup. Very reminiscent of like a Tom Seaver, I think, which isn't a bad card at all. I like they has a normal changeup with a four seam. The sinker makes it irrelevant. They could give him a circle change, I guess. I think he's fine. I think he's usable. He's definitely overpriced right now for what he is, and his hits aren't super great. So I think a card like this, All Star, probably be cool. Hall of Fame, the hits are probably a little lower than what you want on Hall of Fame, and then on Legend, you're probably good because people just have small PCIs anyway. So it's kind of a weird arc. That's just kind of what I was alluding to with pitching, being pretty nuanced and hard to really tell who's going to be crazy. Sonny Gray, I believe he's going to be kind of like Tanner, which is why I put them together. Traditionally, I don't pitch super great with Sonny Gray cards. Four seam sweeper, sinker, curveball, cutter. And I'm going to assume he has some pretty good control. So if he's playing down, probably wouldn't use him. Maybe C tier. If he's playing up or just normal, I think he's B tier. He can be a good control guy if you just want to put it in a corner every single pitch. Otani, probably S tier. It's tough to say without using them. They gave him a sweeper instead of a slurve. It's a lot of the same pitch. And he still is kind of wily with his control, but at the end of the day, it's still Otani. He still has a good pitch mix. And should have some of the higher hits for a starter in the game. Ryan Presley just came out. We see our second, third, never mind. New Threads card. New Threads came out, so this is our first reliever. No, it's not even the first reliever. I don't know what I'm talking about. He has a good pitch mix. He's a super solid budget option. I don't think he's going to be anything crazy. He doesn't throw super hard, so he might get lit on All-Star. So maybe B, but then on Hall of Fame and Legend, I also think he's going to be pretty good. So, like I said, it's hard to really rank a lot of these guys. Fingers, S tier. If you used him last year, he's a lot the same this year. One of the few pitchers that have a huge speed differential at this point. So, on All-Star, he's going to be one of those few guys that kind of get you swings and misses, especially without outlier. Roki, A tier, just doesn't really have the speed differences. Does have outlier sinker if you had outlier four seam, or if they gave him his cutter back. I think this card would be gross. But as he is, just not really a crazy card. Clemens, obviously S tier, best pitcher in the game. I don't know how long that'll last. I don't think he's anything crazy, but he is just miles ahead of everybody else at this point. Bobby Suarez, probably B tier, good budget option. Double outlier, but the hits aren't that great. I think the cutter isn't as slow as you probably want it to be to get rollovers, and then he just doesn't have great speed differentials, which holds him back. If he gets a card like he got last year, I think he'll be really good. But this current iteration of him, not that crazy. Dibble, never been a Dibble guy. Just I think he's not that hard to hit personally. But if you want to have a guy like Dibble in your rotation, my general advice would be have one of them. You got to pick between him, Mason Miller, and Class A. Do not have a full bullpen of guys with kind of that pitching archetype. Rob Nin, probably B tier. He's kind of like a gimmick pitcher because this one doesn't have outlier. But he does just throw a really ridiculously hard slider that helps you jam lefties with him. And helps you to get out switch hitters, but I don't think he's going to have anything super great against righties. You're going to be throwing the four seam, the splitter, and the slider like constantly trying to get outs with them, and just probably not having a ton of success because he doesn't have outlier. So the speed differentials aren't going to be awesome with him. He's going to give up a lot of foul balls. Goose, S tier, one of the few guys in the game right now that has outlier, will struggle with control. And does have that typical Goose pitch mix, which isn't necessarily the best, but at this point, I feel like pitching's pretty weak, so he's pretty solid. This Pedro, C tier, not terrible. Like, he's usable if you're on a starter team, cool. The problem is he is the gold, like, Nats team affinity, I'm pretty sure. So it's like, by the time you get to him, you're probably not running a starter team anymore. Skeens, I think A tier. He just doesn't age super great as a pitcher, as a starter for me. Like I said, with Goose, he has outlier, and not a lot of people have outlier, but he's also a reliever. So he's only got to see like 6, 8 batters, something like that. Whereas Skeens is going through the lineup multiple times, and his pitch mix is just not good. Like he has the really fast outlier fastball, and then all his other pitches are like same speed, same break, to where it's just not really great. He needs like something else in his pitch mix to really take him to that next level. But I think he is usable. This Nolan Ryan C tier, he has like the typical Nolan Ryan pitch mix with no outlier. So just doesn't really fare super well for him. Schultz, I think, is S tier. Nothing wrong with this guy. Funky release, high hits, good control, pretty good pitch mix. His sinker's a little glitched to where he doesn't throw it as hard as it says he's supposed to. He throws it like 91. It says he should be topping out at 97 on it. That's never going to happen. And then his slider is a little slower, but no pitcher has everything right now other than Roger Clemens. And even like Roger doesn't have the craziest hits or clutch or anything like that. So you kind of have to pick your battles right now. Scherzer hurts my soul. Tigers legend. Just not really ever good in MLB The Show. And when he is good, he's just like a usable card. And I don't think this is like a super usable card. Max Fried, probably top of B, maybe A if you get along with him well. He kind of has like if he's there, Glavin isn't there. They're kind of similar where they're more like finesse lefties. And if you're facing a lineup full of lefties, they'll probably be pretty good. If there's some righties mixed in, it'll kind of suck. Fried usually has like a funky delivery. Obviously, I haven't got to use all of these cards, especially the new ones. But usually he's kind of funky. Matt Strom, if there's like a must-own gold card in the game, on offense, it's Santander. On defense, pitching-wise, it's Matt Strom. Bro is disgusting. He's probably still the best lefty, even with all the new cards that we got today. So he is just something about him. He's just impossible to hit lefty-lefty. Mason Miller, wherever Dibble is, he's there. Like I said, I don't think this type of pitcher is hard to hit whatsoever. And if you're going to have, just pick one of them. Don't have them all. This Mark Davis card, super mid. I think I'll give him B. Like, all of his off speed is pretty trash, and it's all about the same speed, and you're just going to give up a ton of foul balls. But at least he can run a fastball by you at like 97, 98. So I think that makes him at least usable, but not great. Luis Severino, very solid budget card. Kind of like Sonny Gray, where the hits are kind of low. So on All-Star, he has better speed differentials than like Tanner and Sonny Gray. But on like Hall of Fame, his control isn't going to be as good. And his hits aren't going to be as high. So that's kind of one of the downsides of him. Logan Gilbert, I think this is the first card we got to look up in a while because they love to change his pitch mix from year to year. So we will see what he's rocking with now. So we got a kind of hard slider, not super hard. A pretty fast four seam, which is topping out at 100 nowadays. Splitter, cutter, curveball. So this is actually a pretty solid card. 83 hits, 86 walks, 78 clutch. He's definitely not in like that Glasnow territory. I think he's honestly A tier. If you can get him on a day where he's playing up 5 like he is today, he looks like a stud. He looks like a pretty solid card to use. Kind of similar to like Zach Wheeler. I think Zach Wheeler is just a little less volatile. Lee Smith, A tier. Don't know what it is about his pitch mix. He's just always kind of hard to hit. He's not overwhelming. But ever since he got like that Charisma Cardinals card a while ago, or I think it was Cardinals, it could have been Red Sox. He's just been like very solid. He's very similar to like Riley Fingers, where on paper doesn't look like he'll be super hard to hit, but then in practice he is pretty tough. And just kind of consistently a good option to bring out of the bullpen, which is all you really want out of a bullpen pitcher. Kenley, D tier, has some good through nines. The pitch mix just isn't really there. The speed difference isn't there. Not going to be great. JV, another guy, hurts my soul. I think he's even worse than Scherzer. At least Scherzer has 5 pitches and has like a cutter to get some rollovers on. JV's just a little over the hill at this point. Justin Martinez, A tier. Against bad players, he will eat them alive. Against good players, it's not going to be good. Not going to be good with Justin Martinez. Has a really hard slider, one of the hardest ones in the game, but just not crazy. Alvarado, if he's playing down, probably avoid. He's always kind of the high difficulty lefty guy. On All-Star, you can use him and he'll probably be okay, but he really thrives more on those higher difficulties. Jordan Zimmerman, I think value-wise is A tier, maybe just in a vacuum as a pretty solid starter. He is S tier. I think I'd rather use Zach Wheeler and at least have that splitter than like kind of the default pitch mix that Zimmerman has. Definitely not worth locking in the NL East for unless you were going to do that anyway. John Franco, never crazy, never a dominant reliever out the pen, but also usually not a bat. He is a little more volatile than a lot of these other guys I've been saying that about, but usually he's like a solid enough option. This Johan card, faced him yesterday, trash, just not good. Now only has 4 pitches. They aren't 4 great pitches either. So he's mid. Musgrove, really bad through 9s. I think his pitch mix is more or less fine. They might have gave him like the double curveball treatment. But I know his like hits are not good. 72, 87, or 91 pitching clutch, so that's pretty good. 4-seam, curveball, cutter, circle change, sweeper. So they did kind of give him like the double curveball treatment. He at least has some speed differentials. I think he's usable, but I think a lot of these guys in the B tier are just kind of usable guys I wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards. Joe Kelly, super good budget card. And if you're on All-Star, he's one of your better options. Past that, I'd probably get away from him. He has like 61 pitching clutch. The hits are good. The pitching clutch, not so much. You just can't really have a reliever where if a guy's on second, you need to pull him. I don't want a reliever that's like very good with nobody on and trash if somebody gets on. Jim Cat, haven't used him. I think I might just leave him in the tier list. He seems like a card that you kind of have to use to really understand. Jeff Hoffman, D tier. Looks really good on paper. He plays down every single day. So if you can get him on a day where he plays up or he's just default, I think he's a very similar option to like Felix Bautista. But until I actually see this number be green, he's sitting in the B tier. Because when he plays down, is what it seems like. Arrieta, S tier. I think he's super solid. Those are really hard slider. It's like 90, 91, 92 miles an hour or something like that. I think I've seen it hit 93, so that's really good. That's a good tool against lefties, good tool against switch hitters, and you can always run it away from righties. It's not going to have great speed differential for throwing outside to a righty, but will shrink the PCI a lot, so it's pretty solid. Jackson Jobe, A tier. You can make it work. Throws a really hard fastball and throws a nice like Ohtani type cutter where you're going to get a lot of rollovers on it because the speed difference is that big. So I like using them like that. All of his other pitches, though, are pretty trash and not super usable. Obi Milner, S tier. Just lefty against him is not going to be fun. He's basically the lefty Darren O'Day. So if you've already been hating Darren O'Day, you're not going to like Obi Milner. Hagen Smith, top of A tier. This card's a sinker away from being S tier. If he had a sinker instead of a 2-seam, he would be a tough card. But he doesn't. So Griffin Jacks, B tier. I see a lot of people really gravitate to this card. He throws like, I think 2 curveballs and like a slider or something. It's bad. Like his sinker's really good. I think he has like a cutter that's pretty good, or a 4-seam, something like that. But the rest of his mix, not great. Greg Maddux, never been a big Maddux guy. He's a guy that gets absolutely like lit on All-Star and gets kind of good on like Hall of Fame and gets kind of good on Legend, but this one has low hits and he's topping out even lower than most Greg Maddux's do. So never been a huge fan of him personally. Cole, B tier, usable. Has one of his better pitch mixes, but he's never going to be playing up because he's going to be out with elbow surgery for the rest of the year, I believe. And then just doesn't really have that overpowering fastball. If we ever got like a Pirates Cole or like an Astros Cole that actually had outlier, I think he'd have some potential to at least be good. But without it, he's just decent. He's just another guy. Kirby, I want to say B tier. He's such a control freak, but his through 9s are always bad. He's never going to have outlier, I don't think. So you're seeing 96, so he's topping out like 99, and that's on a like perfect pitch. Not a hard slider, also not a slow slider. Good sinker. The sinker's good. Knuckle curve, throws a splitter. So I think he's like usable. I think he's in that Glasnow tier. I'd rather use Logan Gilbert just because he's topping out a lot higher. Personally, Perry, Mr. Perry here, I think he's just solid. I haven't used him a ton, but just judging by his pitch mix, unless he has like a ridiculously funky release, I think he's just there. Garrett Crochet, if he had outlier, S tier. If he had higher hits, S tier. I think as he is, just good all-star pitcher, bad Hall of Fame pitcher because he's going to give up some huge PCIs. And then, like I said, when you get to legend with him, when you get to go, when the PCIs start to really shrink, I think that's where he'll be at his best. But he's just kind of very good on certain difficulties, not so great on others, and that's just kind of how the game plays. Valenzuela can be hard to hit, just because speed differentials, and if you alternate like outside and inside timing windows with him. The problem with this one is the one we got last year that was like semi-usable and pretty solid was throwing like 96, 97. This one's throwing like 94. So you just don't really have that ability to gas people up as much with this one. Still usable, definitely not worth locking in the Dodgers for, but a usable card. Maybe on GOAT he might be disgusting, but on all other difficulties I wouldn't really think twice of it. Felix, A tier, very similar to like Hoffman, same ish pitch mix. Just has a really funky over the top release where you don't really see the ball come out super clean, and that's kind of what he's thrived on for years. No outlier. Very similar to like Rob Dibble. He's another guy where if I have him, I'm not running Rob Dibble, I'm not running Mason Miller. Even though he is like a split finger pitcher more than the other two. Speaking of the devil, we have Class A here. Another one of those type of pitchers, has an outlier cutter instead of the four seam, so something you got to think about with him. Devin, just mid. I think he goes with like Valenzuela, where I think he's actually better because he comes out of the bullpen, but his like speed differentials are probably better, but he doesn't have the four pitch mix that Valenzuela has, and his hits and pitch and clutch probably aren't as high either. Not super sure. I don't think it's worth looking up. I don't think you should necessarily be running Devin Williams at this point. O'Day, A tier. Good hits. He's a submarine guy. Good pitching clutch. The problem is he's topping out at like 88. So maybe on GOAT, he would actually be pretty tough to hit. But in practice, he's just not that crazy. And he's not going to shrink PCIs super reliably on like Hall of Fame. Unless you're playing some guys that have pretty bad contact. So I'm not a huge fan of him. I think he's solid. I think if you do Beltron, he should be in your bullpen. But I don't think he's like your go-to. Corbin Burns, solid as always. It's Corbin Burns. I say it every single year with him. Very good pitch mix, but people are just used to it. They're going to know how to hit him. And he's probably not ever going to be as good as he looks on paper. Kershaw, I want to say B tier. He just doesn't throw hard. Like, this is like old man Kershaw. He's topping out at like 94, I believe. Haven't used him a ton. So, yeah, so he's topping out at like 95. More times than not, it's going to be 94. Maybe if you put some parallels on him, you can get the velo up a little bit. Circle change, sinker, 12-6 slider, 81 hits, 64 pitching clutch is really bad. 20-mile-an-hour velo difference, but that is between his four seam, which is already not great, and his 12-6, which you're not going to be throwing that much. So, just a pretty mid card. Usable. You can win games with him. Not saying you can't. But not great either. Clay Holmes looks pretty good on paper. Just doesn't have great through nines from what I've seen so far. Clay Buchholz, top of A tier. He's a guy where on All-Star, you can probably pencil him in to give up like 6 runs. And he's not going to be great. But as you get to Hall of Fame, he'll be better. As you get to Legend, he'll be better. And on GOAT, I think he's pretty good. But nothing crazy, nothing to write home about. Chris Sale, the same gimmick pitcher that he always is. He's just losing velo every single year, so he gets a little easier to hit. Still going to throw that obnoxiously slow slider, and it's going to work on some people, and it's going to be funky, and the first time you see him, you'll probably hit terrible off of him, but then after that, you'll probably be good. Chase Dollander, looks good. One of the better budget options in the game. He's nothing crazy. He's like everybody else in this tier where if you told me they gave you a good start, I'd believe you. If you told me that they sucked, I'd also believe it. So that's just kind of what that tier is. Chase Burns, 4-pitch pitcher. He's terrible. I don't even know if he's B tier, actually. He's like C tier. He does throw really hard, but that's about all he's got. Sabathia, I believe his pitch mix is pretty good. I haven't like pitched him online because his hits are just really bad, and it's like old man Sabathia. A lot of people get him kind of mixed up with the Hyper Series one that we got last year. That was actually pretty solid, but you're looking at 73, 68. He's topping out at like 95. Circle change, slow slider, cutter, sinker. Objectively, like pitch wise, he isn't terrible. So maybe I bump him to like A tier. But I think on All Star, he's going to be terrible. On Hall of Fame, he's going to have low hits, low pitching clutch, so that's not going to help you. More of like a legend guy, legend GOAT type guy. He could have some life. Miller, probably S tier, because the way I like to structure my bullpen is 3 lefty relievers to go lefty lefty. I think he's probably one of them at this point. I haven't earned him personally, but he's just Tanner Scott with a sinker, so he's going to be better than any of the Tanner Scott cards that we have right now. Bubba Chandler, 4-pitch guy, down here with Burns. Doesn't throw as hard as Burns either, so if I wanted to be more critical, I'd downgrade him even more. Trinan, E tier, similar to like Suarez. At least Suarez has double outlier. Trinan has better speed differentials, but it's like on the sweeper, which not a ton of people are going to swing at. Painter, very similar to like Chase Burns. He's like upgraded Chase Burns. Throws really hard, but has a 4-pitch mix to where it's just not really gonna matter. He's gonna get lit up more times than not. Chapman, S tier by default right now. This is basically just a silver card with like better through 9s. So if you like the silver card, you'll like this one. If you didn't, he's probably still gonna be mid. But there's not a ton of amazing lefty relievers. You can see we have Strom, Miller, Chapman, and Milner. So I think they're all pretty serviceable right now, especially in the meta that we're in, where a lot of people do stack their lineups with lefties. So you kind of need some good lefties out of the pen. Wouldn't hate having 4 of them, especially if you're starting a righty starter. Blake Snell, B tier, has potential, and down the road, if they give him an extra pitch or if they just change one of his pitches, he'll be better. But he has a slurve and a slider, which is in practice kind of the same pitch. He does have different speed differentials on it. But then he's also throwing, I believe, a 2-seam and a 4-seam or something like that. We can see. I just faced him. He's not great by any means. You can see 101 hits, 100 pitching clutch. So the clutch and the hits are actually pretty good. 4-seam, slurve, circle change, slider. Just not a hard mix to hit. Maybe on Hall of Fame, he'll give you some good starts, especially if your opponents have a lot of lefties. I don't know if the stats that they're showing here is taking into account his inside edge or not. If not, then he's one of the best hits guys in the game. But if that is with the inside edge boost, then, you know, it's just whatever. And then Billy Wagner. Honestly, B tier. That's not going to be a popular one. I know some people are going to object to that. But I just think every Billy Wagner that doesn't have outlier sucks. He really needs his outlier. He is super dependent on his outlier. I think his slider is always trash. I think his curveball is always trash. And then you're just a 4-seam changeup guy without outlier, so he's just not good. So hopefully you guys enjoy the tier list. We're going to have to earn Jim Cat so we can actually see how good he is. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Till next time.